Have we recovered from that one yet? I don't even know. That was a weird one with the Cincinnati Bengals and the New England Patriots. Bengals pull out the win, 22-18, in one of the weirdest scores that you could possibly get in the NFL. So unique that it has never happened before, John Sheeran. Merry belated Christmas, my friend. Happy Hanukkah to those out there celebrating that. And happy early New Year. I'm Anthony Cosenza. As I mentioned, he's John Sheeran. John, the Bengals keep their winning streak alive, move it up to 7 games, and they are now 11-4. And oh, by the way, they are in the playoffs.
Yeah, merry belated Christmas to you. It was almost Festivus on Saturday. Had they had given up those 5 yards, it was so close. I'll peek back the curtain a little bit for everyone else when writing the recap. That whole second half, like this is a loss, right? Like I just watching it, everything that went down on that final drive. The title of the article was "Bengals collapse the Patriots, lose 25-22." Like it was written, like the entire thing was formatted. Like the intro was like, "Oh, Bengals collapse," in like the opposite fashion that they did last week to Tampa Bay, and then the defense once again makes another clutch play to the point where it's just the expectation now. And yeah, 7-game win streak. Here we are.
7-game win streak. We're going to talk about a lot of different things, including, but not limited to, different facets of this game, what we make of the end result of it, in terms of, viability of the Bengals and whatnot. Of course, some aftermath in terms of La'el Collins, potential options there, and more, all on the aftermath episode this week. We usually do this Monday with the holiday and whatnot. Things obviously get a little wonky, so we're doing it at a little bit of a different time. And then later on tonight, you can go check out in just a couple hours. You can check out our boys, Bengal Jim and the gang, doing their thing, talking with Bengals.com editor Jeff Hobson. So you won't want to miss that one. And of course, this show and others on the Cincy Jungle podcast channel, available on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, all of the major ones. We are there. You got to go subscribe there. Leave us a review if you could. And of course, if you like the video, you got to give a thumbs up on the Cincy Jungle Facebook page, or beneath my guy John and that SB Nation logo down there. You can click the OBI logo, subscribe there, click the bell to be notified when we go live, when new content is available, and we will keep hammering you, peppering you with content. I mean, as you know, on CincyJungle.com, my boy John, too, he was writing up stuff on Christmas Eve. I did a show on Christmas Eve. We are working hard for you, and hopefully you like what we're bringing you. But regardless, it's not about us. It's about you. It's about the Bengals. And Bengals come up victorious on this one, 22-18. Seems, we'll take it. And we'll talk about what this win, how you viewed the win in a little bit. But it's one of the things that I seem to notice this week as opposed to weeks prior. And I don't know if this is the Bill Belichick effect. I don't know if it's because the Patriots passing defense was pretty strong going into this one and whatnot. There was some kind of, I don't want to call it alarming, but more perceived communication issues, John, between the Bengals receivers and Joe Burrow this week than in past weeks. And case in point are the 2 interceptions. It appeared on the Tyler Boyd one as he was going inside. Boyd kind of stopped. Burrow thought he was cutting in further, and Burrow threw that pick across the middle there. And then the chase, what ended up being the pick 6, looked like Burrow thought he was cutting out to the sideline. Instead, he jets up the field. So there's a miscommunication there, and that kind of started the whole comeback thing by the Patriots. So that was a little concerning for me this week, because that's just not something you see very often between Burrow and these guys who have played together, be it college or in pros now, for, a handful of years apiece.
It sucks that, both of those led to the 2 turnovers in this game, or I guess 2 of the 3 turnovers in this game. Still, 52 passes, complete like 40 of them. Obviously very efficient in that
like
regard.
77%. Yeah.
I'm gonna just say this, and I don't blame Tyler Boyd at all. I really think he just felt the hit coming, and he just didn't finish the route. And I totally get it. Sometimes, like quarterbacks, like we saw it for years with Peyton Manning and Austin Collie specifically. I think Peyton Manning concussed Austin Collie like 10 times with passes over the middle, and McCourty was just charging in there like a raging bull. He was going for the ball or the hit, whatever the case may be, and I felt like Boyd maybe sensed it and kind of let up a little bit. Maybe I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt, but like I totally understand that. With the other interception, that was definitely miscommunication for sure. And I feel like on those third and longs, when you have a pressure or blitz look, which is what the Patriots had, it was like the exact same pre-snap look that the Bengals had against the Bucks a week earlier when Trey Flowers got the interception. They had man coverage in the back and they loaded the box. And instead of dropping back 8, they blitzed. So I assume that the Bengals have some type of alert call. When you have that blitz, you don't have enough time to really just launch a go ball down there. So I think against that pressure look, the call is to have a back shoulder type of a comeback route, and Chase just wasn't on the same page. It definitely looked like Burrow just kind of laid it up there and didn't really care, but I feel like that was the design route against that pressure call, and unfortunately, Chase wasn't on it. But I feel like Chase had a solid game aside from that, and the fumble was the fumble. That's a rarity nowadays, so I'm not too worried about those yet because it was 2 out of 52 passes, I guess.
2 out of 52. Yes, that is true. And here is the I'll play this here for folks. The video we're talking about, at least with the Chase one. I've got this pulled up via Twitter here, and we can check it out. But I mean, it looks like you said here. In New England territory. We'll turn the volume down on that, but then it just kind of flutters out there. Right. And then it just disaster from there. So I'm sure it'll kind of show it again here as he goes all the way into the end zone. But yeah, I mean, really, you see Chase kind of scooting upfield and Burrow thinking he's going outside. And as he goes outside, because if you see there too, he kind of had a little bit of an opening to the outside, but just didn't work there regardless. Not a good play, and it kind of kickstarted the Patriots coming back to win that, or not win, but almost winning that one there. So I just noticed that as kind of something that where I felt was a little concerning. But with that, John, Trenton Irwin stepping up in a big way and was just so close to a hat trick. So close to a hat trick. I don't know if that was Boyd, if Boyd makes that catch in lieu of Irwin in the slot there. I don't know, but a nice play initially with the seam route, and then another nice little play, a little out route to the right side of the end zone there, and then almost had another that really would have put the game away, regardless of how the Patriots ended up playing in those final 2 quarters. If the Bengals got that touchdown, it kind of would have put the game well out of reach. Did not happen, but Irwin stepping up nicely, making a couple nice plays, 2 touchdowns on 3 catches this week.
And he earned that opportunity. He scored his first touchdown on that exact same call, just splitting the 2 safeties there on that seam route. And Burrow, his throw was just a hair longer than Irwin was expecting it. But I feel like this game was a great example. Right. It was a great example of this narrative that Burrow's getting carried by his receivers. This game was the exact opposite of that, because not only did you have that drop, you also had Jamar Chase down the left sideline. He dropped one where it kind of hit his shoulder pad because, he was expecting it a little bit like a foot out in front. There was a T. Higgins drop in the end zone. There was I don't know if you want to call it a drop for Chase in the end zone when he was going up with it for one hand, but Joe Burrow easily could have had 5 touchdowns in this game, and he could have had a lot more yards, even though he already had 375 on the second ranked pass defense. And some of his receivers just, if he was truly being carried by his receivers, then they make those catches, right? Even if it's not a perfect pass, then they're doing everything in their power to get the ball. T. Higgins had a great game, and those 2 jump balls were phenomenal to see. But this was one of Joe Burrow's best games, and even if the stats were as good as they were, they could have even been better. And I feel like that may get lost in the aftermath of this game because he had the 2 interceptions, because he had the pick 6. That's just unfortunately what New England does, right? They have 6 defensive touchdowns this season. They just take advantage of those opportunities. It helps that Marcus Jones is this freak athlete who plays all over the field on all 3 phases, and that's just a testament to how special of a player he is. But 2 interceptions be damned. It was one of the best Burrow performances I've seen, especially when you factor in the weather. That ball is hard to catch. It's hard to throw when it's that cold and windy outside. So taking everything into account, the competition, the environment, I was really impressed with Burrow this week.
I was too, and the kind of the talking point you've seen a lot of people say, and I would agree with, is that, man, even his even his incompletions were impressive, right? I mean, you talk about the just miss to Irwin and the incompletion to Chase that bounced off his shoulder pad and whatnot. It's something to kind of marvel. And Bill Belichick, he gets these guys, these defensive backs, seemingly I mean, it's a third round pick here. He's had all these other guys that come in and out of there that ended up being pretty good defensive backs that aren't necessarily always high picks. So he knows how to get some talent there. That's for sure. But Irwin stepped up nicely. Man, I thought Higgins was awesome with those 50-50 balls, like you said. And then, of course, John, I mean, it's easy to sit here now and say like, oh man, maybe not the strongest performance by the defense because of the comeback, but that's not really the case because the defense had only allowed basically 12 points in this game. The other 8 or 6, I guess, came from the pick six, right? So, I mean, they played really well. Ramondre Stevenson, I think, had 30 yards rushing. There was one run play by Bourne who had like a 29-yarder and whatnot. But, I mean, they stifled the run. They got the turnover at the end. And then, of course, when you only let up 12 points as the defense, your special teams is letting you down in terms of leaving points on the board. And then you miss a couple of big plays on offense, even more pressure on this defense to kind of keep this thing together and win.
I mean, 6 points, like you said, was Marcus Jones' pick six. The other 6 points was maybe the luckiest Hail Mary I've ever seen that was played very well by the Bengals. And unfortunately, Jacoby Myers just happened to be there at the right time. Kendrick Bourne looked like Jason Bourne out there with some of those catches. Like he was playing out of his mind on some of those deep balls. Yeah. So, like, I get it. Like, it's not great to allow some of those deep catches to Bourne. And there was a couple of lapses in there, but you still gave up, in my mind, like 6 true points to the Patriots offense because they couldn't get anything going in the first half. Like, they had like 3 first downs. They had, I don't know, like less than 100 passing yards at most in the first half. It was a completely lopsided performance, and largely because the Patriots just couldn't do anything offensively, and that's a testament to how well the Bengals defense played. And I feel like they played just as good in the second half, and they let up just a little bit at the end there. They allowed some long drives, and eventually the Patriots got into the red zone. And Taylor Britt as well, like he was targeted 9 times in this game, and I felt like this was the quintessential rookie game from him because he flashed a lot of great talent in terms of finding the ball for the first time. I really feel like there was a couple of deep pass breakups that he had, but also he couldn't find the ball in the back of the end zone, and he had his back turned, and Mac Jones just targeted the back of his helmet, and Kendrick Bourne came down with the touchdown. So you kind of take the good with the bad right now with Taylor Britt. You're still going to see those rough reps until he gets more consistent and just a little bit better. Quarterbacks are going to continue to test them, and he's going to continue just getting better, or maybe just trying to find himself as he keeps getting targeted. So that's just the state of the defense right now. You have cornerbacks who are susceptible to getting beat on some of these routes, but you still have a front seven that's playing really well together, even with only about 20 or so snaps from Trey Hendrickson.
And that's a good segue into what I think was one of my favorite things about the defensive performance this week, and that is 4 sacks on Mac Jones. Now, part of that is Mac Jones is not mobile at all.
Yeah.
Part of it is that the Bengals were getting after it, and it's nice to see, John, when you have Hendrickson on a limited snap count, you don't have Sam Hubbard. What you have is Osai and Carter splitting a sack. You have Josh Tupou getting in there for a sack. You have Logan Wilson grabbing one as well. And then, of course, Cam Sample, who had a nice game as well. Cam Sample was one of the top-rated PFF scorers by the Bengals this week as well. So that's the kind of stuff you want to see with your star players out, guys kind of stepping it up and making some different things happen with those guys resting or on a limited snap count. And that's what a lot of players were able to do for the Bengals this week on defense.
He had 12 combined pressures from Hendrickson, Sample, and Osai. And mind you, Hendrickson only rushed the passer, I believe, 19 times this game. But Cam Sample was a true starter, I believe, for the first time in his career, and he played a starter's load of snaps, and he looked really refined as a pass rusher in ways that we haven't really seen before. Now, the Patriots' tackles aren't necessarily great or anything, but I think I saw a little bit more juice in his first step and his get-off, and I saw some good things from Joseph Osai, too, who I think had 5 of those 12 pressures that I mentioned. So there wasn't a lot of true quick quality sacks. It was a lot of guys just making it easier for others. I believe Zach Carter's sack was more of a cleanup because of the work from the other players as well. So it was just a really well-rounded team effort from this defense that, again, was without one of its best players and had to compensate for a limited role in Trey Hendrickson. I was a little surprised, Anthony, when he was out there for the first snap, because you saw him just not being as involved. But when he was out there initially, I'm like, oh, maybe he's playing this entire game. But I think that's maybe the plan for this week coming up.
Yeah. So I guess the big question for me in this one, John, was I'm curious at how you look at this game and look at this result, because I mean, I know everybody, of course, the easiest thing to say is a win, and I don't really care how they got it, and style points aren't a thing or whatever. I know, but I guess my thing is, did you look at this win and say, man, there are some, kind of cracks in the armor, so to speak, and they're just kind of starting to really stumble through maybe what looks like a winning streak coming to an end, and that's maybe a little concerning, especially with injuries playing a role in things as the season wears on here. Or did you take this and say, wow, what guts and fortitude and everything to kind of hang on and find a way to win? I said this in my I said this in my good, bad, and ugly piece on Cincy Jungle, that Ramondre Stevenson thing could be one of those plays you look back when you document a season. You do a documentary on how a season played out, whether it's a Super Bowl winning season or just a special one in general, and you look at that play and you go, that's just kind of a play those good teams make, even if it's kind of fluky and lucky and all that kind of stuff. That's those things bouncing your way seem to point to something good, generally speaking, but I still am trying to navigate my feelings on this game here and the result.
Well, for one, I feel like like we talked about at the very beginning, like we're just so accustomed to seeing these plays be made by this defense. It's almost like it's not really fluky
It's
or lucky
routine.
anymore. It's just like right, it's just routine. Now, granted, Stevenson I believe hasn't fumbled since week 1 of 2021 when the Bengals had that clutch fumble against Dalvin Cook in that same week. So yeah, it was uncharacteristic for Stevenson to find himself in that moment, but backs up against the wall. This defense has made a habit out of bailing this team out when its offense kind of lets up off the gas a little bit. But I think in total, if you had told, if either of us had said the final score of this game would be like 21-17, which I feel like both of our predictions were kind of around that, we would kind of understand that, right? Because again, the Patriots defense, a phenomenal unit, even if they don't have as tremendous of star power as they used to have, like Matt Judon, Josh Uche, they got after the passer. Their secondary still played well as a unit together. Obviously, T. Higgins being 6 inches taller than Marcus Jones, that's a mismatch. But overall, that secondary did end up stepping up at the end of the game. It just ended up being a lot more wackier than we expected, because when you dominate like that in the first half, you think that, okay, this is going to be more of a cakewalk. But like we saw, it was the inverse of last week. The other team just ended up, pulling up their bootstraps a little bit and just, buckling down and playing a lot better. So in a totality sense, I feel like this game from like a macro view ended up about where we expected it. It's just the flow of the game was definitely way more unorthodox than we were expecting.
It's weird.
And and at the end of the day, they still did pretty well against a really good defense, and I feel like that's a positive. But if you want to play the old mentality, like, man, we got our butts kicked in for a half of football there, and it was definitely like a wake up call that they needed. I feel like that's valid as well.
Right. I guess I just didn't like the thing that really bothered me with this one were the missed opportunities, and we talked about this because this could have been way uglier than it was. The Chase bounce off the shoulder pad, the Chase fumble that kind of kept him in the game. The miss throw catch to Irwin in the end zone for another touchdown there, and that was the most irritating sequence of plays. There was a 2-play sequence there where you miss the touchdown throw to Trenton Irwin, and then you trot out Evan McPherson to take the field goal consolation prize, and then he misses that. And it's just at that point, you're just like, oh my gosh, how frustrating is this? So between the missed opportunities from some of your and that's what also worried me a little bit. Your best players are causing errors or involved in errors or missed points. That being Burrow throwing 2 touchdowns, one being a pick 6. Boyd, Chase involved in a couple of turnovers there, and then of course Evan McPherson leaving 5 points on the board there. There's some concern for me a little bit, and I think that's where I'm like, I guess I'm being a little nitpicky, but and you take the wins obviously as they come and how they come regardless, but I don't know that this kind of stuff's going to be able to fly against the Buffaloes, maybe another matchup against Kansas City and that sort of thing coming up here.
No, absolutely not. Like, at the end of the day, these past 2 weeks have not been enough to beat like the truly good teams in the NFL. Like, I look at the Kansas City game where they went up pretty quickly and they established dominance. And while the Chiefs kind of came back, like, it wasn't because the Bengals like played terrible. Like obviously they left points on the board there too. Like Tyler Boyd had the drop, but it never really felt like they were like losing grip on the game. You know, it felt like they were always in position to really finish it off. And these past 2 weeks, like they started terribly against the Bucks and they finished terribly against the Patriots. And it's going to be hard to do that in the playoffs against the likes of the Bills and the Chiefs again. So there's definitely lessons to be learned here. But still, like these have been 2 pretty good defenses that the offense has had to come up against, and the defense continues to be this high level unit despite the injuries. So it kind of, I think there's equal amount of good and bad here to take away from it.
All right. Well, one of the bad things to take away, unfortunately, is a big injury on the offensive line. Now, La'el Collins hasn't been totally steady as the right tackle, but definitely a large improvement from what we saw last year. And one of the guys who was out there starting for the team at certain points is now slated to be his replacement in Hakeem Adeniji. The shame of this, John, is that this offensive line has started to finally gel quite a bit. There's been less hits, less sacks on Burrow, that sort of thing. Definitely an imperfect unit, but much better than last year. And they just kind of feel like the communication finally feels like it's there. Guys were kind of getting in the right places and whatnot. And La'el Collins takes a nasty hit. Someone rolled into his leg and ended up blowing 2 ligaments in his knee. He is done for the year. Hakeem Adeniji is in. And if you're looking for that jumbo package, that extra lineman package, then now you got Max Sharping coming in there on that regard. It looked like this week, at least that was the plan for this week. So I don't know, man. That's a big blow to this offense. And I don't know how you feel now with Adeniji stepping in there. I like the fact that he's got starting experience, but he's been a lot of this in those starts.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how they handle those jumbo packages because Sharping had 2 penalties and 9 snaps. He was active because he was like the 7th lineman because they can only activate so many people. But once you have La'el out of the picture, I wonder if that extra activation goes to Deontay Smith and then he becomes the 6th offensive lineman. But again, like we won't know that until it actually happens. When it comes to Adeniji versus Collins, I feel like you're getting not the exact opposite player, but a player who wins and loses in the exact opposite ways. Meaning that, like, with Adeniji, he gets out of his stance so quickly. It's like it's the one thing that he cares about, like just getting out into your stance, creating space, getting out into space, and then starting your set. And it feels like that is his top priority, and he gets out of sync with his hands. And that's why sometimes you see him really late with his punches, and he gets beat to the outside, but also him getting out into space so quickly makes him susceptible to inside counters. So I feel like if you just look at the Adeniji as an overall pass blocker, he is very similar to Jonah Williams, where he is a little bit on the lighter side, and that can lead to some issues against power, but he's not going to be a liability for getting beat around the edge. Whereas with Collins, he had no explosion out of his stance this year, whether it be from his back injury or anything else that kind of piled up. Like that has been his biggest concern, and he would lose the edge so often, even to the point where he was falling on his face sometimes. So that I don't think that's going to be an issue anymore. So now you have 2 tackles that kind of win and lose in the same way, and Burrow has to adjust for that. I feel like at this point they had a good understanding of who Collins was, and they were adjusting accordingly. Now it's like the opposite adjustment for him. Maybe he has to step outside of the pocket. Maybe he has to step up a little bit more. So we're going to see how that goes on. But from a totality standpoint, like I don't feel as if Adeniji is going to give you completely worse production as a pass protector compared to Collins. The biggest difference might be in the run game because you won't get as much push with Adeniji as you did with Collins. Maybe you change the blocking scheme up front and you run different run concepts in there. But I think obviously Adeniji will have the benefit of preparing as a starter instead of being thrown in there and having everything kind of rushed. And I can't really blame him for having those bad reps being in that situation. But I think we can both agree though that his skill set is way better suited to that tackle compared to right guard. No one's really panicking with him being out of position like he was in the playoffs last year.
Would you, I kind of feel like, and I don't know, this is kind of painting with a broad brush here, but I kind of feel like the highs just aren't as high and the lows maybe aren't as low that we've seen with Collins. I just kind of feel maybe slightly higher floor and definitely a lower ceiling with him. And I do feel more comfortable and no offense, Isaiah Prince, but I do feel more comfortable with Adeniji playing tackle at this point in time than I did with Prince. So, I think that is something that, and unfortunately a lot of teams have to try and overcome this kind of stuff, especially this point in the season. It's just a shame when you're trying to make this postseason run that this big injury occurs to one of your big ticket free agent guys. And the good news is, though, it is a guy that has started at both tackle and guard in the NFL for the Cincinnati Bengals. So he's going to have some experience, and I don't think there's going to be a ton of communication lost between him and the rest of the group, but definitely not an ideal situation. And one of the talking points, John, and we'll get to a couple more headlines too in a little bit, but one of the talking points that has now surfaced because of some interviews with big old number 77, Andrew Whitworth, there is some kind of chatter, might he come back to the Bengals, play for a competitor, whatnot. Here's the thing, and I don't mean to be the bucket of ice water on everybody here. He's not going to play right tackle. That's one. So you'd have to then shuffle probably Jonah, I would think, over to right tackle at that point. So you're kind of replacing two positions there, both tackles. Maybe that's even something that works better for Jonah. I don't know. But regardless, this late in the season, tough to do that. He has to get out of the contract. I think he's still in some form of a contract as a retired player with the Rams. So you got to navigate that. And then you got to pay him probably a pretty good amount of money for a short little run here. But I just don't think it's going to happen. It would be really cool. It'd be an awesome story. And it would be incredible if you were to go in there and help the Bengals win a Super Bowl a year after winning one with the Rams. But I just don't see it as a realistic situation that's going to happen.
I mean, yeah. When asked about Andrew Whitworth, Zach Taylor laughed it off because the idea of bringing in, at this point, a TV host to start, not just be a part of the team, to start at offensive line after he hasn't been training. He's a retired individual. Like, he's not anywhere near football shape. And if the argument is, he can have 2 or 3 weeks if they get the bye to train up and just go back in there at left tackle, it's completely unrealistic. And all this is happening because he went on a podcast and said if the opportunity was brought back up to become the winningest offensive lineman in the history of the NFL, right, and in this case would be during a postseason run, like, he would be interested in that. But the practicality of it is just it's not there. Like, I think Rob Gronkowski had like this cryptic tweet about like how he was bored, and there was a report that like 2 teams called him or like texted him, if you're interested in coming back, play for us. I don't think that's the case for a 41-year-old offensive lineman who, again, is, at least to my knowledge, not working out and not anywhere close to being in football shape. It's a great story, and it got traction because of what he said. So I guess there is somewhat of a smidgen of interest from the player side, but this has to be interest on both sides. And I don't think the Bengals are going to have that interest because they need a starting tackle and they need one who's ready to play right now. And that's just not Whitworth.
So any other options that would intrigue you, that would be at this point a better option than Adeniji? I mean, there may be some players out there that could provide maybe a higher level of talent perhaps, but I feel like familiarity brings a good, is something that can't be sneezed at. You know what I mean? So I don't know if there's anyone else out there that you kind of say, hey, maybe the Bengals pursue this, that sort of thing. But right now, I think it's Adeniji, and that's just going to be what it is, and they'll roll with it.
Yeah, again, I think he's much better at right tackle or just any tackle position compared to playing inside at right guard. And also, I saw some things against the Patriots where it's like the communication idea of this, like the passing off of stunts and twists, like that was still there because he has been practicing with the twos at offensive line or at offensive tackle. And that I don't think is going to be lost replacing Collins with Adeniji. It's going to be the physical limitation, sure, and that's just the case with going to any backup offensive tackle in this case. But familiarity with the scheme, with the players that he's playing with, like that's still pretty much there. And the more he practices at that spot next to Alex Kappa, the more in tune he's going to be with it. So I feel like that is truly the best option. It's never easy to bring an offensive lineman off the street like I quit in Spain a couple of years ago. It definitely took him a while to really settle his feet and play at the best that he could towards the later part of 2020. And I think when you're 2 weeks away from the playoffs, there's just not a practical option at tackle to do that.
Right. Well, let's get to a couple of other different headlines stemming from this game and obviously going forward as well, be it with the Bengals and the AFC North. We like to kind of take a quick spin around this as we do at the beginning of the week here. I'm going to let you start with yours here, John, which was the snap count article and maybe some trends you noticed in that this week. Obviously, things looked, you note it right here at the jump here, new reality for the offensive line with Akeem Adeniji. Could hope to continue that he's up to the task there. So there you go with that in the live chat, and we've got this pinned up here. So walk us through this a little bit because you do this weekly for Cincy Jungle.
Yeah, nothing that we haven't really already talked about, like the distribution of snaps between the defensive linemen with Cam Sample and Joseph Asai. That was interesting. It was obviously Sample's like highest percentage of snaps played in a single game since being drafted. Joseph Asai pretty high up there with 35 snaps as well. Trent Irwin with his 37 snaps because I don't know if you know more about this, Anthony, but it was either a re-aggravation of Tyler Boyd's injury or like a new finger that got kind of stumped there. So that was interesting to see him get called off the bench again for the 17th time this year. He's just really established himself as that wide receiver number 4. And I guess something I didn't really write about, but it is kind of nice that the Bengals pick and choose these weeks to really feature someone new because of where they played in the past or if they have any relationship with that team. But Devin Asiasi played 32 snaps against his former team, the New England Patriots, and I think he had like 2 of his 4 career catches against them as well. So they really do like to make an effort to try to involve these players in these in these timely manners.
That's a good point about, kind of new hero each week type of thing. That's a good point there. Yeah, but you can check out the snap counts there on Cincy Jungle and the link provided there. And then, of course, with that, John, we've got some Joe Burrow MVP odds. He's kind of been hovering in that number 3 spot, and now he's jumped up to number 2 in terms of MVP odds. Obviously, these things would probably change depending on the result this week against the Bills here, and then, of course, how the Bengals finish the rest of the season there. So something to note, but that's the article right there.
Yes, I believe like a month or so ago, he was like plus 1,100 to win MVP. Now it's plus 600. So Patrick Mahomes is still minus 500 or whatever, however you would read that. So he's still the clear favorite to win MVP. And this has kind of been the case over the past couple of weeks. And last week I started to look at the advanced stats between Patrick and Joe since week 3, just to give like either to not weigh the beginning of the regular season more or to also just put into account that Burrow wasn't himself. Ever since week 3, though, like adjusted completion percentage, PFF grade, big time throw percentage, touchdowns, average depth of target, yards per attempt, Burrow is just as good, if not better than Mahomes in pretty much every single one of those categories. So if you value how you finish more than how you start, then Burrow probably should be closer in terms of like the conversation about who's playing the best at quarterback right now. I would still probably give it to Mahomes just because he didn't start out of the gate as sluggish as Burrow did. Mahomes is still the greatest quarterback to ever play in the month of September, and that's probably the edge. But I feel like it should probably be closer between the two of them in terms of the odds because just how well Burrow is playing compared to Mahomes.
Yeah, and then you've got, if you saw the graphic last night on Monday Night Football, Burrow and Allen's numbers in terms of total touchdowns, rush pass, and interceptions and all of that, those are pretty even too. So, pretty tight race between Allen and Burrow. It just seems to be a pretty heavy favorite for Mahomes to win this award. A couple of other fun ones this one isn't so much fun. I guess we'll end on the fun one from the Bengals side of things. This is something that became a talking point here, and this is Mac Jones facing the potential fine for a dirty hit on Eli Apple. It was on that tuck rule weird play between where Mac Jones, I thought it looked like a fumble at second look, but here he is. He will be fined, is the latest update from everybody's best friend, Mike Florio of Pro Football Talk. Mac Jones is going to be fined over $11,000 for a low block on Bengals cornerback Eli Apple. Seemed to me, John, it was pretty unnecessary. Going for the knees didn't need to happen, especially on a play that didn't even end up counting on top of that. So to me, I don't really feel sorry for Mac Jones here. I think he did something that was just kind of unnecessary, and I didn't really know, but apparently this has kind of been something he's done before. Twisting ankles and other things has been caught on film from him too.
Yeah, he's become the Grayson Allen of the NFL, and that's not a good thing. Like early in the season, there was a play against the Bears where he was sliding as a QB does, and he literally kept his foot up and kicked someone in the nuts. And it was just so nonchalant, and no one really made a big deal about it, which is like, it was kind of like this, where when upon seeing it at first glance, you don't think it's dirty because he's just a crafty player in that regard. He just knows how to get away with some of the stuff. But yeah, of course, he had no real reason to just dive in front of a fully sprinting Eli Apple from behind. Like, that's like, you can't block below the waist like that anyways.
Yeah. Here it is here. Meant to cue off the video there. Let's try, and you can see at the corner here, he's going to just dive right there and kind of take out Eli.
Like, I get it, he doesn't want to block in the back at that point, but like, I feel like being a quarterback, you kind of don't really think that those rules apply to you sometimes. And like you said, he's kind of made a habit of just flying under the radar for just kind of really pushing the line here. And yeah, I don't really have any sympathy for him.
Yeah, well, he did get fined over $11,000, so that is that. It is settled. He may appeal it, who knows? But as of now, he's going to take a hit to the pocketbook. And then here you go. Here, Chad Johnson, friend of the show, Chad Johnson. He's going to go to the Bills game. Are you going to the Bills game, John?
I am not. I do not have that kind of money.
Okay. He's going to be in the stands, is Chad. I'm sure he will be talking up fans and hanging out with people and doing the thing. Obviously, this is a marquee matchup, huge for playoff seeding implications and whatnot. But if you are going to the game, keep an eye out for old 85. He'll be cruising around. I'm sure he'll be cruising around the city. I would assume Saturday, Sunday, depending on when he gets out there, hanging out with people and talking with the great folks of Cincinnati, as I'm sure he often does. Kind of still a good ambassador for the team and everything there. It's good to see him still be around the team and the team respond to him, show him the love there. We'll get to some AFC North stuff quickly in just a minute, and then we'll start scooting on out of here. Before we do, one last one on the Bengals. This is how the Bengals can clinch the AFC North in week 17. Obviously, a lot of us are looking at week 18, that clash against the Ravens, showing how the Bengals, I mean, that's just kind of a direct, hey, you beat them head to head, and even if you have similar records or whatever, that's going to determine the AFC North. But there are some scenarios where the Bengals can clinch in week 17. Essentially, it would be them beating the Bills and the Ravens losing to the Steelers. Oh, by the way, John, Steelers-Ravens gets flexed into prime time. So basically, Bengals need to win, Ravens need to lose. And then on that scenario, John, we're talking about a Steelers team who may yet avoid a losing record, despite how poorly we thought that team was going to be. Unbelievable what they keep pulling out of their, well, we'll say their magic hat instead of a different area. So, yeah, that game is flexed. Ravens Steelers to Sunday night. Bengals play Monday night. So essentially, if Ravens lose, the Bengals win. That's kind of how the Bengals can clinch the North then.
I don't want to go through the mental gymnastics of figuring out how the Steelers can clinch a playoff spot, but they would have to go, obviously, win out, and then a bunch of other teams have to lose. I think there's only one spot.
Can you imagine?
Left, so, I mean, I can. I've seen it before. Didn't they get in with Duck Hodges? So, like this is no difference for me. But, yeah, I think a lot of people said earlier in the year before the season started they're going to be at the bottom of the NFL. And like, this is the Steelers. They don't normally do that despite the quarterback play. So whether they finish 8-9, 9-8, another very middling year for that team, which is their version of being at the bottom of the NFL.
Purgatory. Yeah, absolute purgatory. Well, this is on Baltimore Beatdown, the SB Nation Baltimore Ravens site, and they've got a lot of different things. But in case you had not heard, with their win last week, a barn burner, 17-6 against the Atlanta Falcons, the Ravens get into the playoffs. There is there are potential scenarios, depending on what happens, where the Bengals could potentially play them, early in the playoffs or what have you. So we'll have to keep an eye on things. But that team somehow got in the playoffs despite all the injuries, and really they have not been impressive for really the last month or so in terms of points scored, who they've beaten, all kinds of things. I may eat crow, or I may eat raven rather, going forward here if the Bengals end up losing to them, if they've regular season or not. But man, they have not been impressing me, at least.
Yeah, it doesn't help that you don't have your quarterback out there, but
It doesn't.
they've found a way. They found ways to win, and I feel like if we want to look at the likely playoff scenarios and matchups, Jacksonville, should they win the AFC South, which they're looking like the favorites now, yeah, they're looking like they're going to play an AFC North team, whether that's the Bengals if they happen to lose to the Ravens in Week 18, or the Ravens themselves, who are the most likely to finish at the 5 seed. And like I think it was 3 weeks ago that the Jags and Ravens played, and the Jags ended up winning that game. So yeah, I would
Good
feel like the
point.
Ravens would want revenge for that one. So it's going to be an interesting matchup if it comes to that.
Couple more here, and we will hop on out of here. But this is a little bit of an update on what's going. There's two things with the Steelers. Josh Jackson, their defensive back, got picked up by another team, but they also made a number of roster moves before this game coming up against the Ravens here. And I will note these here, the link in the live chat for folks, and you can see here they are for you. Signed linebacker Tay Crowder to the 53-man roster off of the Giants practice squad. They placed Marcus Allen, not that Marcus Allen, a different Marcus Allen, on injured reserve, and signed safety Scott Nelson to the practice squad. And then again, as I mentioned, Josh Jackson, a former defensive back of theirs, got picked up as well. So making some moves, all on defense for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
This has nothing to do with those moves, but just watching that game Saturday night, 3 days after the death of Franco Harris in the game where it was supposed to honor Franco Harris, I feel like we all kind of knew how that game was going to end, and the Steelers ended up winning on a game-winning drive against their 1970s rivals. So good for my mom, though. She's a Steelers fan. She almost shed a tear there.
There you go. A lot of kind of poetic justice from the Steelers side of things on that one, and then of course, a lot of similarities too, kind of the Franco Harris era, where it's cold, it's windy and terrible weather, it's late in the year and all kinds of stuff. It just kind of was very Steelers-ish, Franco Harris-ish. Obviously, his death, quite a shock, not something that was, expected in terms of a long-term illness or anything, at least that I've heard. So rough one there, but they did win one for Franco Harris on that one. And then, of course, this is just – it's an opinion piece on Dogs by Nature, but man, sobering one. If you are a Cleveland Browns fan, will the Browns ever get it right? I'm inclined to just answer that no. They just keep doing things that make you scratch your head. They, right when you think they turn a corner, they go, 4 steps back again. And quite honestly, it makes you feel a little bit like some of the Bengals teams we had witnessed in the past regime here, Marvin Lewis's era. And I don't know that. So just an interesting read here, Dogs by Nature from Thomas Moore. And you see here the subheader, despite seemingly doing many things correctly, the Browns continue to flounder. Is there hope they can find whatever it is they are missing? So very interesting article. I'm sure Bengals fans would have a lot to say about that. But, you could just go through a myriad of different things here with this article and the Brown struggles.
Well, even if you do many things correctly, if you don't do the most important thing correctly, which is, I don't know, not find a terrible person to play quarterback and give up 3 first-round picks and $250 million guaranteed, that's kind of a big roadblock in your way there. I guess when it comes to expectations for the Browns this year, like I don't think anyone really expected them to make the playoffs, but it kind of ended up being the inverse of what people may have expected, whereas Jacoby Brissett ends up being their best quarterback, and Deshaun Watson's rust is just way too much for them to overcome. And despite Brissett being solid for, 10, 11 weeks, they were still like a losing team, or they were still not really in the conversation for the playoffs. They were losing almost in spite of how efficient he was playing. So they got decent football out of their backup that was playing for Deshaun Watson, and they just couldn't do enough to withstand the terribleness that Deshaun Watson has been in these 3 or 4 games since his return. So this was never, I think, a serious year for the Browns, and they're going to put all their chips in to the next handful of years and hope that Deshaun gets it right.
Now you can see here more talks about the Pittsburgh Steelers as kind of the model franchise, and then obviously talking about Deshaun Watson and whatnot in there as well. So really well thought out article, and one that probably had a little bit of emotion behind it. And unfortunately for Browns fans, it rings true based on what we've seen from them, that backslide from that great 2020 season they had. And they're even when you think they've got something at quarterback, it just carousel spins and spins and spins again for them. And that's that. But that's going to do it also for us on this week's Aftermath. We got to some headlines. We talked about the win over the Patriots and, of course, the La'el Collins injury, Hakeem Adeniji in the lineup, and everything in between. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and we'll be getting you more this week on the Cincy Jungle podcast channel. John, let's wrap it up. But anything you want to get off your chest here before the new year comes to pass?
Not necessarily. Just hope everyone had a safe holiday wherever you were in the country. If it happened to be impacted by a blizzard, I know people in Southern California didn't really have anything.
No, we got rain coming tonight, though. We got rain coming.
Oh, wow. Rain in what? 50, 40 degrees?
Yeah,
very toasty
do you want me to tell you what it was on Christmas Day weather-wise? I think you
I actually don't.
Okay.
I actually don't.
Okay, I won't.
But I hope everyone drove safe, stayed home, had fun, watched the Bengals win, and hopefully they will get another one Monday.
It rhymed with in the heavendies.
It's too much information, man. Too much.
I don't have much either. We've got more coming later this week to preview this one. We're going to try and get some special guests for this big game coming up here and see what we can do about that. But we appreciate your time. We appreciate you guys tuning in live or after the fact, whether it's on your favorite audio streamer, whether it's on YouTube, the Cincy Jungle Facebook page, on Twitter, however you like to watch us, listen to us. We appreciate it. And Bengals got 2 more big games coming up, and then hopefully a lot more after that in the new year, in the postseason. John, take care. We'll catch up later this week, my friend.
Talk to you later.